Hey there, my friends. Brian King here. One of the interesting conversations that have been coming up in the past couple weeks is the issue around feeling like people are staring at you. I've heard from people who are so concerned about this that they rarely leave the house, they won't go to the gym and take care of themselves. They don't like the idea of just taking a walk around the block because they're afraid people are going to stare at them, either because of a physical difference or because they're afraid that they, might make a mistake or might look foolish and people might stare. And this is something that I really need to discuss because it's something that I too had difficulty with when I started using a cane and a walker and a wheelchair. And one thing, hey there, Janice, thanks for tuning in. One thing I realized, and I think this is pretty common across the board, is the fear of staring has more to do with your internal dialogue than what's going on with the other person. The people that are afraid of being stared at have a degree of shame around their experience, some kind of embarrassment, some kind of internal judgment. They feel less than, they feel unworthy, and they feel vulnerable around that. And because of it, they are afraid that somebody else is going to come along and confirm that decision they've made about themselves and their circumstances. That somebody is going to come along and say, hey, you broken person. Yeah, I see you over there and I'm judging you just like you're judging yourself. That's what makes staring an issue. Because if you were confident, if you were comfortable in your own skin, you wouldn't care what somebody else is thinking about you. You wouldn't care for 1 second if they were even looking at you because you've got your own life to live. You've got stuff to do. And I grew up like many parents that have kids with special needs, with meltdowns in the grocery store, with kids running away from me, kids not listening, and all kinds of things that would look like I was a bad parent, that my kids were out of control animals, a lot of those things that parents with special needs kids are afraid of. And another thing that I learned, in addition to, working on my confidence and having the perspective of realizing that these other people are not decision makers in my life. They don't determine when I get paid. They're not paying my bills. They're not part of my support system. So who cares if they have any kind of opinion about what's happening in my world? Because our job as people is not to make everyone happy, in spite of the perfectionism in us. Our job is to take care of the people that impact our lives and the people whose lives we impact. Perfect strangers come and go. We don't have a responsibility to make our life so perfect that no one is ever judging us, because they're always going to judge us against their own lens and what they've deemed perfect in their own little world, right? Okay, that's just a stream of consciousness tangent. But one thing that I've also learned is one way to gain confidence around anybody who seems to be looking upon you in any kind of way, whether they're being judgmental or simply curious. Because one thing you and I both know is people live from their own point of reference, from their own world. And if they do look at us with any kind of difference, it's typically because they don't understand it. It's not their experience. If they look at you in a wheelchair and they're walking, they may not know what it's like to be in a wheelchair, and they may be curious. It doesn't mean they're looking at you and saying, look at that guy who's in a wheelchair, man, his life must suck, it must be terrible. And sometimes people do think that because in their minds, they believe they would have a hard time when they were in their circumstances. So that kind of projection, could look like judgment. But again, it's not a reflection upon you. It has more to do with them. So what I like to do, and this is kind of like some learned extroversion that I've become accustomed to over the years and trained myself to do, is I interrupt whatever pattern is happening in their mind. I don't give them a chance to judge, and if they have judged, I totally blow it up by my response to them. And by interrupting their pattern or their thinking, what I do is something that's unexpected, a little unorthodox. And let me give you some examples of how I do that. If somebody is truly staring, meaning they're not breaking eye contact, they seem to be looking up and down, I'm not just talking about a simple glance here. Somebody seems to be really observing me. I'll say things like, next show starts in an hour. Because that totally rattles them. Like, what the heck do I do with that? There's no real response to that. And that messes up their head. It also shows them that you're sharp, you're paying attention, and maybe it makes them think about their initial assessment of you. Another thing you can say to them, just being perfectly honest and opening up that door, is to say, did you have a question for me? Because it's quite possible that they do. They want to know, hey man, what put you in the wheelchair? That's a valid question. In my case, I could say, well, I have MS, or I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it makes my joints very unstable. And they're a little bit more educated and hopefully a little bit less judgmental. Because some people have looked at me and say, man, you're a little young to be using a cane, aren't you? And I'll say, well, I'm not too old for a genetic disorder. And then I explain to them a little bit about what that means and why I need the cane. So, oh, well, that makes sense. Well, I wish you well, Betty. Thanks for answering my question. But there are ways that you can respond that open the door to self-advocacy, to being able to educate them, instead of immediately thinking, oh, I can't leave my house, I can't go to the gym and take care of myself because I am responsible for other people's judgment or concern or questions about me simply because they know nothing outside their own experience. If you want to change the perceptions of other people and any kind of stigma they may have towards you, the best way to do that is education. But it's you that must open the dialogue. Mindy said it all starts with being comfortable with ourselves in order to be vulnerable enough to be real and raw with strangers. Hallelujah, Mindy. That's totally my philosophy. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 second that you flip a switch in your brain and go from self-conscious to self-confident and step outside the door and say, all right, today I'm educating the world. It's much more of a decision that my responsibility in this world, in connecting with other people, is creating a bridge so that we can connect. And one of the ways to build that bridge is to eliminate ignorance. And one of those points of ignorance is the belief that I am so different from you that we can't connect. And a lot of people believe that. You see the division in our country right now. And the belief is that there's me, and then there's them, and we are so different that we are enemies. We're not even fellow citizens. We're not people that can have a conversation. There's just too much of a difference. That's all BS. It's all mindset. It's all propaganda. It's all toxic. It's like when you see somebody that you feel able-bodied, they have a disability. You have one color skin, they have another. If you decide that our differences separate us so vastly that we can't connect, you are forgetting something very critical, which is at our foundation, we are all vulnerable human beings that are just trying to figure this thing out. This wonderful human experience that's often confusing, exciting, frightening, but also very beautiful. And one thing that I like to do is start from that premise that, hey, I'm just a human being just out there in the world experiencing it, and so are you. Does it matter that you're standing and I'm in a wheelchair? Does it matter that your complexion is darker than mine? It doesn't matter one bit when it comes to the human heart. So when I see somebody else that's staring or seems to be confused by me, I want to establish a point of connection with that person. I might even compliment them. Hey, buddy, great to see you. What, do we know each other? No. Hi, I'm so-and-so. Good to meet you. And again, this is extroversion that doesn't come natural to me. I'm very shy in person. You wouldn't believe that for a second, would you? But see, right now I'm talking to a screen as opposed to people. So it kind of makes it a little easier. But in those moments, my priority and my value of educating people, eliminating stigma, creating a bridge, to me, that's more important than protecting my own comfort zone. Because one thing I talk about frequently is that I've got 3 boys, all with special needs, Asperger's and ADHD. They're watching me live my life. And I want them to see modeled for them self-advocacy, confidence, self-respect, not somebody who is afraid of the world, not somebody who is a victim. In order to model that, I've got to step out. I can't hide. So it's not just me I'm doing this stuff for. I'm doing it for their benefit and the benefit of others who are with me in this journey, who need me to step up. So I know I've said a lot of stream of consciousness. I just kind of wanted to get this out there as some food for thought. Please comment and let me know what you think about this. And I want to hear your thoughts too and your experiences about how you've dealt with the feeling of being stared at, because this can be very paralyzing when you think that the world is judging you and therefore you need to hold back. That is not fair to you one bit. So share your thoughts, and by all means, share this with other people you think can benefit from it. Until we talk next time, this has been Brian. Take care.